Hello, my name is Andrew Hatherley. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst helping people going through later life divorce. I went through my own gray divorce and want to help you save time, money, and reduce stress so you can move forward with confidence. Reach out for a free consultation at transcendretirement.net. But for now, let's get on with the podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode. An episode that, frankly, I couldn't imagine I'd be celebrating 4 years ago. But here we are, episode 100 of the Gray Divorce Podcast. Given this milestone event, dear listener, I ask for your indulgence. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you my reflections after 99 episodes, and also share some thoughts about what the future holds, not only for the Gray Divorce Podcast, but for people like you going through mid to late life divorce. When Professor Susan Brown wrote about the Gray Divorce Revolution back in 2012, people getting divorced over the age of 50 represented somewhere in the mid 30% range of total divorces. Today, nearly 40% of people getting divorced in the United States are 50 years of age or older. As recently as 4 years ago, I felt a little lonely out there focusing on the subject of gray divorce. Now, just within the last few months, gray divorce has been covered in articles by the New York Times, the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications. Oprah Winfrey even did a podcast episode of her own on gray divorce. I gave my opinions on Oprah's podcast in episode 82. Spoiler alert, I think Oprah could have done a much better job. In general, though, this increased media exposure for the topic of gray divorce is very positive, and I'm happy to be one of the voices bringing attention to the unique circumstances of people getting divorced later in life. As most of you know, I got divorced back in 2015 at the tender age of 52. I could never have predicted that 11 years later, I'd have created 100 episodes of a podcast all about mid to late life divorce. But for me, the podcast was a way to make lemonade out of the sour experience of my own divorce, to help educate people about the divorce process, and to learn from the mistakes I made and that many others of you out there have made. As a financial advisor, my divorce was a humbling experience because I found out that there are so many things I didn't know about divorce finances. For many people, myself included, late life divorce is the largest financial transaction of our lives. And when I started this podcast, the financial planning world had plenty of content for the 35-year-old accumulating wealth, and almost nothing for the person standing in the wreckage of a 30-year marriage trying to figure out if they can keep the house, or how their retirement plans would be affected by losing half their money. I wanted to provide the sort of information that wasn't easily available to me when I was going through my divorce. While financial issues are obviously a core component of the podcast, I must admit that one of the great pleasures I've had from doing the podcast is hearing from listeners about how they've managed to grow personally after divorce. I'm convinced that surviving a difficult divorce makes you stronger and encourages you to challenge yourself to take on new adventures. That's certainly the case for me. The podcast has led to numerous high-profile speaking opportunities, for one thing, something I couldn't have imagined 10 years ago. Now, if you're anything like me, public speaking's probably scared the you-know-what out of you for most of your lives. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. 10 years ago, I would never have accepted the opportunity to speak in front of 100 family law attorneys at the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers National Conference, but I did just that 6 weeks ago. I've never been a big fan of motivational catchphrases, but I have to admit that there are at least two that I've experienced in my life to be very true. The first is, perfect is the enemy of done. And the second, feel the fear and do it anyway. After 100 episodes, the Great Divorce Podcast is still far from perfect. But we've got 100 episodes in the can now, and more people are listening all the time. I know from the phone calls and emails I get from you listeners that the podcast is helping people. If I had procrastinated and waited until everything was perfect, I never would have gotten started. And I'm sure many of you have projects that you'd like to get started that perhaps you're procrastinating on. My advice, take the plunge. And so with respect to feeling the fear and doing it anyway, well, here's another motivational saying. Nothing great happens inside your comfort zone. It's only when we push ourselves do we grow. It's when we challenge ourselves that we can experience a real feeling of accomplishment. And the beauty of it is, and I think I'm quoting Marianne Williamson here, is that when we are being the best versions of ourselves, we're also being the best contributors to the society in which we live. We're helping others, and maybe even inspiring others, to be the best versions of themselves. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another quote because it was delivered to me personally by a client of mine. He said this to me when I turned 50, but I think it's even more appropriate having turned 60 a couple years ago. So I'm going to rephrase it for the 60-something crowd. And he said to me, Andrew, your 60s can be the best time of your life because no one will see you coming. He was right, wasn't he? Nobody expects much of us after 60. This is the time when we graze the proverbial pasture. Unfortunately, ageism seems to have a strong shelf life as an acceptable prejudice. Now, I'll confess, defying society's expectations of what a 60-something should do or how they should behave gives me some satisfaction. And I know that many of you listening in the audience feel the same way. So yes, I'm proud of the podcast. I'm proud that I've never missed an episode or been late publishing an episode. And believe me, there have been some close calls along the way. In the 50th episode of the podcast, I pointed out that I was surprised by which episodes resonated most with you listeners. You might be shocked that neither episode dealt with the financial or legal aspects of divorce. For instance, episode 31, titled Should I Stay or Should I Go?, is a discussion on discernment counseling with Linda Hirschman, a licensed marriage and family therapist. For those of you who might have missed the episode, discernment counseling is a short-term therapy approach designed specifically for couples in crisis. Discernment counseling focuses on helping couples get clarity about their relationship and make informed decisions as to whether the relationship has a future. The most popular episode with listeners over the last 4 years was my chat with Dr. Carol Hughes on adult children of Great Divorce. Episode 16 was a great conversation. Carol is the co-author of the book titled Home Will Never Be the Same Again, a guide for adult children of Great Divorce. And I think the reason this episode was so popular is that this is an area of divorce that is so often overlooked, the impact of late life divorce on adult children. Because the law is so focused on protecting minor children in divorce, understandably, a myth has emerged that once these children become adults, their parents' divorce has no effect on them. This episode is full of practical examples and advice on how divorcing parents and their adult children might better deal with divorce in the family. It's one of the episodes I'm most proud of. So, okay, enough looking in the rearview mirror. Let's talk about where this goes from here. One of the developments that I'm really happy to see over the last 4 years is the emergence of alternative divorce processes like the Amicable Divorce Network and Soul Agree. I've had the founders of both these processes on the podcast, attorneys Tracy Ann Moore Grant with the Amicable Divorce Network and attorney Amanda Mason with Soul Agree. I'm willing to bet that as more family law attorneys become disenchanted with the litigious divorce industrial complex, that alternate resolution-focused processes will become more popular. I love it when listeners reach out to me before hiring a family law attorney. Many times, I can steer them towards a less confrontational process that will result in less emotional and less financial stress. Finally, reflecting on the first 100 episodes of the podcast wouldn't be complete without my sincere thanks to those who've helped put the podcast together. First, I'd like to thank my production assistant, Renee Lovecraft, who puts the pieces together and ensures that the podcast actually gets distributed to the world. And I'd like to thank my wife, Jackie, for her patience, as occasionally our social plans have been disrupted by my need to absolutely get the podcast recorded and ready for Saturday. I'd like to thank all of the guests who make the podcast so much richer by sharing their expertise. And of course, most importantly, I'd like to thank all you listeners. So next time, back to regularly scheduled programming. Until then, take care.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Grey Divorce Podcast. To learn more or get in contact with your host, you can visit Andrew's website at transcendretirement.net. Also, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Information provided is educational only and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Each situation is unique and should be discussed with your tax or legal advisor prior to implementation. Andrew Hatherley is not an attorney and does not provide legal advice. Information provided is financial in nature. Advisory services offered through Hatherley Capital Management, LLC. Divorce financial analysis services offered through Wiser Divorce Solutions, an affiliated company.